Welcome to the first Q&A video I've done on this channel. A couple months ago, I asked for your questions as a celebration for hitting 100,000 subscribers, and in this video, I'll answer as many as I can. Let's quickly get started, because I got a lot of stuff to get through. Can you tell me more about yourself? I can. I got a lot of questions about myself, so let's go through those first. How old are you? I'm 25 at the time I'm making this video. Are you Dots Are Cool? You sound like him. I sure am. The same Dots Are Cool who has a Twitch channel and used to stream speedrunning, who had the Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island credit warp world records at one point, who created the Super Mario World speedrunning practice cart, who posted some older videos about Super Mario World mechanics on YouTube, and who posts silly things on Twitter at Dots Are Cool. Can we get a face reveal? It wouldn't really be a reveal since I've used my webcam on my Twitch streams for years, but I suppose I can switch on the camera here, because I got this in the mail the other day. I will admit I have opened this already, but I will open it again for you guys. Suppose let's go this way. Got a nice letter, which I'm not going to read. It's too much time. Shout outs to Rick for putting this together. That is so blurry. It says Rick put together the award, so thank you, Rick. And the real thing. Ta-da! Thank you, everybody, to make this possible. Let me go ahead and open this. Oh, yes! Silica gel. So shiny, look at that. You can see the webcam. There it is. Now I just gotta hang it up on the wall. Now it sits here, just above my computer desk. What are your favorite books? Just like I don't really watch movies, I don't really read storybooks either. However, I do have this set of manga based off of Super Mario World by Kazuki Motoyama. These are cool because they make a lot of obscure references and jokes about the actual levels of the game. And they also have these really neat pull-out maps of every level in the game, which you can tell were made by sewing together a bunch of screenshots of gameplay. What do you do for a living? I've come to the realization that this channel is what I do for a living, even though I haven't really considered it until relatively recently. Favorite ice cream flavor? Unfortunately, I'm lactose intolerant, so none. Sometimes I have cookies and cream anyway, and suffer the consequences. What's your favorite letter? Any alphabet. The capital iodified big Yus, also known as the cat. Do you like cats? I do like them better than dogs. My family has 4 of them. How are you? I'm doing great, thanks for asking. Where did you get the idea to start this channel? Was it because of the video you made 4 years ago on your other channel where you explained how the credits warp worked? Yeah, so it all started when I began speedrunning Super Mario World. By streaming on Twitch, I got used to making content for an audience, even though it was a live audience at the time. I've made a few videos about some tricks and glitches in that game on my other channel, which was basically the start of this channel. I decided to make a separate channel for this sort of stuff after finishing the video on SMW RNG. At first, I was planning on it to be a parody of Panenkoek's SM64 RNG video, but then I figured I'd put so much effort into the video partway through that it would be better to just make it more of my own style. I still use yellow text with black outlines in my workflow to help me sync the script to the video, because that was the text I had prepared in that video. I had a lot of fun making that video, so I figured I would do more of them, and maybe expand beyond SMW and the Super NES, so I made another channel. Did you ever go to university? What did you major or minor in? I went to Ohio State from 2012 to 2018 and graduated with a bachelor's in computer science and engineering. I was heavily encouraged to find a focus area, but I didn't, and instead took various computer science courses such as software development, computer architecture, networking, cryptography, computer graphics, functional programming, etc. How did you come to know everything you know about the SNES, NES, or other hardware? My interest in the working of old games started almost 15 years ago when I found out about Super Mario World ROM hacking. Way back when, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I had fun poking around in an emulator and just editing the ROM with a level editor. It wasn't until college 8 years later that I really got a good understanding of what was going on. However, I do think those first several years of just messing around had an impact on how well I'm able to grasp things today. There's a lot of documentation and stuff online about all sorts of stuff, and this is where I get most of my knowledge. I will say, though, that you can't trust 100% of it, so sometimes I have to test stuff myself. Almost everything that I research for my videos, I try to confirm myself before taking their word for it. I also have a few friends that know a lot more than I do in certain fields who I'll ask for help sometimes. When it comes to looking into games code, most of the time I have to reverse engineer or even disassemble it myself. Unless the game is really popular like Pac-Man or Mario, I have to go digging into the bytes myself. Even if a disassembly already exists, it often doesn't have any comments or documentation, so making sense of the code is still left for me to do. If you want to get into this sort of stuff yourself, but don't know if you want to spend a lot of time learning assembly or wading through documentation, I suggest just opening an emulator with a memory editor and poking around a bit. Try to change a byte or two and see if anything changes, and if it does, try to figure out how exactly it changes and why. A lot of times you can get a good understanding of the game without looking at any code at all. This is what I started out doing, which is why I recommend it. What got you inspired to make videos and post them to YouTube about all this stuff? I like watching other people learn. A lot of people are curious about how things work, but don't know how to even begin looking up the answer. I make videos so that I can present information in such a way that it hopefully doesn't require a bunch of programming or computer science background to understand. Do you frequent any Discord channels or forums by any chance? I don't want to pester you, but I'd love to get involved in the development scene around the SNES and its games. I'm not really active in any servers other than the RGME server, but if you are interested in SNES development, I suggest checking out SNES Lab if you haven't already. I could put a link to that Discord server in the description of this video. Do you have any formal training in music? Did you do the notation for the extended one-up sound in that video? I did. My main focus was music throughout high school. I was planning on majoring in music theory or composition in college until my advisors suggested against it. So I don't really have any formal training or experiences, but I've picked up a few things on my own over the years. Do you keep up with any music playing or composing? Shoutouts to Jared, who I went to high school with. I break out several kinds of wind instruments every once in a while to stay in shape, but I haven't touched a percussion instrument other than piano since high school, which makes me sad. I also haven't done any composition since then either, even though I've told myself to get back into it for a few years now. Favorite retro console? Super Nintendo, of course. What's your favorite console? Super Nintendo still, but the DS comes close. What are your favorite games on every retro system? So not only Nintendo, but NEC, Sega as well. Well, unfortunately, I only grew up with a Nintendo system, so that's all I can really attest to. For NES, it's Super Mario Bros. 3. For Super Nintendo, it's Super Mario World. For N64, Mario Kart 64. And for Game Boy, Pokemon Red and Blue. What is your favorite retro video game and why? Now I have to narrow it down to just one. Super Mario Bros. 3. There are a lot of secrets and hidden things in levels that I still find to this day. I haven't fully dissected it like I have Super Mario World, so it's kept pristine in a way. Also, I really love the world maps in this game. I can't say why, but they have a certain charm to them that SMW or the newer New Super Mario Bros. Games maps don't have. What is your favorite modern day game? It's hard to pick just one game since there are so many. In a recent Twitter post, I picked Minecraft, Fez, and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explores the Sky. I've spent probably hundreds of hours playing Minecraft, and I still play it every once in a while nowadays. Fez was a really good puzzle game in itself, but then added the cool perspective-shifting aspect, which made it really fun to play. And then the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series is great because it's a game that involves Pokemon that isn't an RPG, since I suck at RPGs. What was your favorite game in your childhood? Mario Kart 64, by far. Unfortunately, I could never find anybody to play it with. What was your first game and console? The first game I remember playing was Tetris on Windows 95. The first console I had was the Super Nintendo, if you couldn't guess. What is your favorite retro music? Any of the Fallen Brothers compositions are really good. I'm a big fan of the title screen theme from Solstice. Panenkoic has said before that he no longer enjoys casually playing Super Mario 64 because he has tasked it so much and knows too much about its technicalities. Do you feel the same way about the games that you present on this channel? Not really, actually. Even with Super Mario World, which I've been messing with for like 12 years now, I could still play it casually. Although I would probably play it much differently than most other people would play casually. Have you tried to create a game by yourself? I've started a few projects with intent of making a game, but they usually don't get very far. I don't really have the creativity to come up with a unique idea. I've done a few clone games, but those don't ever get completed either. At some point, I want to sit my butt down and finally work on something good eventually. What are your experiences in actually making something for the SNES, like mods or ROM hacks, etc.? I've done a bunch of small hacks of Super Mario World. My biggest project is the SMW practice cart that adds in a bunch of tools to help you get better at speedrunning the game more efficiently. It has built-in save states, memory viewer, and customizable menu and everything. I'm also the creator of World Mario Super, 4-player SMW, SMW One Mind, and the 4-player SMB3 Battle Royale hacks. Have you tried actually programming? I have 3 projects in progress at the moment that I've done a significant amount of work on. The SMW Practice Cart, which I've mentioned earlier, Super Tile Mapper, an SNES graphics and tile map viewer editor, and Distinguish, an SNES ROM disassembler. The last 2 are written in C# instead of assembly, and all 3 of these projects are available on my GitHub if you'd like to see them. Which programming language is your favorite, and which do you use the most? For lower level stuff, assembly for sure. I'm not really a fan of C for some reason. For higher level stuff, I used to be a fan of Java, since that's what we were taught in our Intro to Software courses, but I think C# is fighting for that top spot currently, mainly because that's the language Super Tile Mapper and Distinguish are written in. Do you have a preferred hex editor? I use HXD since it does pretty much everything I'd need a hex editor to do. What emulator tools do you use in your videos? Hex editor, RamWatch, debugger? All of the above. I'm a fan of any visual debuggers like the graphics debugger in BizHawk and FCUX. How long on average does it take to make these videos? I usually don't time myself doing anything, but I actually did while working on the Pac-Man Ghost AI video. I'd say I spent an average amount of time working on it. According to the data, I spent about 50 hours on the whole thing, 33 hours of it was video editing. And video editing definitely takes up the most time out of everything. What video took you the longest to make? Again, I don't really time myself, but I would guess the first Pokemon Cries video took me the longest. Mainly because I was making that web app that lets you create your own cries at the same time, and I was making sure it was as accurate at creating the already existing cries as I wanted it to be. Less of a question, but a suggestion. Some of your videos could really benefit from some quiet background music. I excuse your non-question because I get this a lot and I figure I'd address it. In addition to a bunch of comments pointing out the lack of music, I get about the same amount of comments from people saying they like that there's no music. Here's how it is. If I don't add music, you can always add your own by playing something in the background. But if I do add music, there's no way for you to disable it. I'd rather not have unmutable music. Now, if YouTube ever supports multiple audio tracks, so you can mute just the background music track, then I might add it in. How do you remove the game music and leave only the sound effects? It depends on the game. A lot of games will have a memory location reserved for queuing music, so when it gets set to something other than 0, the song with that ID will begin to play. If I can find it, I'll just freeze that value to 0 so no music ever plays. That's the easy way. If the game doesn't do it this way, or if I can't find it, I'll look for the memory locations that specifically handled decoding sound data and playing notes, and prevent them from doing anything. If worst comes to worst and that doesn't work either, I would just mute everything and add in the sound effects afterwards. I haven't had to do this yet though. How did you decide on the look of your videos? Do you run into limitations with how you can visualize your points? Well, my first couple videos were simplistic looking because I was just learning how to use After Effects, and I just decided to keep it that way because it looks nice. I do sometimes run into limitations because After Effects can only do so much. Also, there's a limit of how complex an animation script can be before the program runs so slowly that it's hard to get anything done, so sometimes I have to settle for something simpler. What microphone are you using? I have a USB Audio-Technica 2020. Could you make a video explaining the 6502 processor architecture? I'm working on a series about learning assembly from scratch, and then there will be a series afterwards on how to start working on a homebrew game. What made you choose the SNES as your main focus? Why not the NES, for example? I grew up with an SNES and not an NES, so that's the main reason. The other reason is sort of selfish in that I know way fewer people are knowledgeable about the SNES compared to the NES. Out of all the possibilities, why did you choose the extended 1-up sound glitch as your intro? A long time ago, I stumbled upon a video that showed off the glitch sound and it stuck with me. I picked it because it's an actual sound you can trigger in SMB3, but most people wouldn't know about it, and I knew I wanted to make a video about it too. After the in-depth SNES hardware series is finished, would you consider doing a similar one for the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis? Or the NES? Or Atari? Or TurboGrafx-16? Or N64? Or PS1? Or Game Boy? Or GameCube? Or Game Boy Advance? Or Amiga? Or Commodore 64? I couldn't give any promises, especially for a series as in-depth as the SNES series. I would like to cover other systems as well, but there are other series and videos I want to work on first. Imagine, if you will, if one could develop a mapper of sorts for the NES, but with modern technology and without any concern about costs. What would be the limitation that could be overcome via the cartridge slot? A lot of limitations would be overcome. In fact, the only limiting factors left is the PPU's color limits. I suggest watching Tom Seven's video about reverse emulation, where he put a Raspberry Pi inside an NES cartridge to make it play SNES games. There should be a card here, and also a link in the description to go watch that. Is any graphic possible on the SNES with a custom chip? Could I put an Xbox 360 in a cartridge and play GTA 5 or something on the SNES? You could, but this may be funny to hear, it would work better on the NES than the SNES. As far as the NES goes, you can do something similar to what Tom Seven did in his video, but add an Xbox into the mix and have the video be piped in. The benefit with the NES is that the CHR-ROM, which holds the graphics, can be replaced with something like the Raspberry Pi that can update graphics much faster than an NES could do on its own. With the SNES, though, the CPU and VRAM are not as exposed, and you have to go through the CPU first. You could get a full 256 colors, 8 bits per pixel graphics on the SNES, but a naive approach to updating the graphics would result in about 5 frames per second. As a trade-off to increase the frame rate, you could add letterboxing to reserve more time for updating graphics versus drawing the image. This was done during Awesome Games Done Quick 2017 during the TaskBot block, where Super Mario 64, Portal, and even a Skype call were streamed through the SNES. You can watch a video of that by clicking the card that shows up here, or a link in the description as well. Does the Super Nintendo have any sort of caches or out-of-order execution? No, but the Super FX architecture does have an instruction cache. How does an SNES one-chip board work that give advantages over a standard SNES motherboard? The first revisions of the Super Nintendo motherboard had one chip for the CPU and 2 separate chips for the PPU. The appropriately named one-chip board had a single chip that replaced these 3, the CPU-N. But the main reason so many people prefer the one-chip board over any previous revisions is that it has a superior video encoder chip. The older revisions had the SENC BA6592F chip, while one-chip revisions have the sRGB BA6596F chip. The main thing that this new chip fixed was the crazy horizontal blurring that's present using the SENC chip. Regarding the internal battery-backed volatile RAM used for save data in cartridge games, how did these games verify that the data is valid and that the player should be allowed to load it? It depends on the game. A good way I've seen it done is to have 2 or more copies of the save data stored in SRAM, along with their checksum. Upon loading the data, the checksum is calculated again to make sure there is a match and the data hasn't been corrupted. If there is no match, the other copies of the save data are checked as a backup, and if those don't match, then the entire save is deemed to be corrupted and it won't be loaded. Regarding games designed for CRT TVs, what happens on digital TVs when a console is expecting a blanking period? The signal the console makes is independent of the display it's plugged into. Generally, there's a device or chip in the console that keeps its own timing and produces a signal that is understandable by the CRT. The NTSC and PAL frame rates of 59.94 and 50 Hz are the standard, but CRTs usually had some leeway, so it didn't have to be exactly correct. For example, the NTSC SNES produces a signal at 60.1 Hz. When plugged into a digital TV, there's a usually cheap upscaler built in that will convert the analog signal into a digital one. These are normally what's responsible for the massive latency between the console and the final picture. Old NES games had a warning to hold the reset button when powering off the console for games with a battery backup. Can you explain a little of why that was important, or why it was thought to be important if it's actually a placebo? When you flick the power off, the console doesn't immediately lose power and shut off, but the electronics inside slowly, well actually very quickly, but relatively slowly, discharge and lose power. When components like the CPU are running at a lower voltage than necessary, things can mess up and random memory can be written to, including the data in the save file. The NES wasn't originally designed to handle SRAM properly, so having random glitches within a small period after switching the power off was no big deal since the console was shutting down anyway. By holding the reset button, the CPU pauses and lets off on most of its pins, ensuring that it can't interact with anything. This is an ideal time to power off the console and prevent those random glitches and SRAM corruption. Hey, can you please explain the SPC700 and how the SNES's 65816 CPU communicates with it? Part 10 in the SNES features series will be about the SPC700. Like I mentioned in a public Patreon post a while back, this video will primarily focus on the SNES's side of the audio system, including how the two processors communicate. Since so many people have been waiting for this video expecting a full dive into the audio capabilities of the Super Nintendo, I decided I'd make another video series separately that would go more in depth about the SPC700, the DSP, and how music and sounds are produced. I might also make a video that explains step by step how a simple audio driver could work and how music data is actually interpreted as musical notes. So if you're looking forward to this, please don't be let down by the SNES features video, which won't reach all the way into that sort of stuff. Could you make a video about the SuperFX chip? So the SNES feature series stops at part 11 because that's all I planned for way back at the start of the series, but I've already decided that I'm going to do a few more videos on some of the enhancement chips, including the SuperFX. So hold tight, that video is coming eventually. Alright, that wraps up the first half of the answers for this first Q&A session. Next half, we'll cover a bunch of questions I got about individual game mechanics that probably won't get their own video. I was originally planning on answering as much as I could in this video, but due to time constraints, I decided to split it up into 2 parts. So please stay tuned for that, and thank you for watching.